Viewers, the Prime Minister's visit to the Middle East, the final foreign trip of his second term, is a fitting tribute, some say, to his transformative diplomacy in one of India's most sensitive geostrategic neighborhoods. The engine driving India's economic boom would come to a juddering halt if it wasn't for Middle East oil, the remittance economy, and the vast market for Indian exports. India's security interests would be severely undermined if the Middle East suddenly reversed the flow and once again exalted Pakistan and China's axis, forged only to isolate India. Today, there is no fear of this, largely because Prime Minister Modi has built some seemingly rock-solid personal equations across Middle Eastern leaders with varying outlooks and political inclinations. The land grant sanctioned by the ultra-conservative Emirate of Abu Dhabi for constructing the first ever temple on its soil is just the latest symbolic appreciation of India's role as a stabilizing regional influence and trustworthy friend. The deepening relationship cemented not just through symbols but also through strategic trade pacts, regional alliances, and security partnership. One of these initiatives has caught global attention. The just concluded pact over establishing a Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or the MEEEC, could upend years of Chinese investment aimed at capitalizing on the vast emerging economic opportunities as Middle Eastern nations pivot away from hydrocarbons. It is hoped that from here on, India will be, if not the first choice, then at least a crucial partner in the modernization of the Middle East. Today, India has acquired strategic depth in the Middle East, some say, and India can quietly and confidentially count on Middle East powers to help stabilize any instability engineered by Pakistan and its cohort China if they choose to cross India's red lines in South Asia. Let's decode this relationship, viewers, and we have with us an enviable list of experts: Professor Brahma Chileni, Professor Swaran Singh, Kanwal Sibal, needs no introduction, Andrew K.P. Leong, an independent China strategist. Let me first begin with you, Mr. Sibal, and a simple, straightforward question. What is the objective behind the Prime Minister investing so much time and energy in developing ties with the Middle East middle powers?
Well, there are several objectives. One, of course, is that this is the source of 80% of our energy. And, any fluctuation in energy prices or any disruption will cost India very dearly. So we have a very deep interest in peace and stability in this area, though we ourselves cannot control the situation there because there are other forces at play. That is one. The other, which you rightly mentioned, is we have about 8 million or more expatriates, 3.5 million in the UAE alone. Earlier on, they were largely construction workers or low-level, holding low-level jobs. But today, they are, in a sense, running these economies at various levels, technically trained people, entrepreneurs, etc., etc. Third, of course, the remittances, which are very, very large and, in fact, offset to some extent. Because we're the largest, World Bank has said that we are the country which receives the largest number of remittances from abroad. So that helps to finance our deficits or trade deficits also. That is one aspect of it. The other is, if you look at the visions that UAE and Saudi Arabia and others have, these 2030 visions, they really want to change course altogether. They're looking ahead to a situation where they will no longer be able to rely on hydrocarbons for their prosperity. So they must have a different template of development. And Saudi Arabia wants to be actually another Dubai and become a center of, like Singapore, in terms of business efficiency, as well as tourism and everything else. And UAE also has a 2030 vision. For India, there are huge prospects in terms of bagging contracts and being part of infrastructure development in these countries. So on the reverse side, they see India as a growing economy, the largest, the fastest growing large economy, going to become the third largest by 2027, 28, or whatever it is. The biggest importer of energy very soon, if not already, uh, and uh, and having a rising international profile, and the success of the G20 diplomacy and everything else, and the fact that we've been able to keep our strategic autonomy, and we don't have any expansionist ambitions, and we don't interfere in their internal processes and give them lectures on this or that subject, makes India a very safe and productive partner. And hence, they're turning towards India. There is the issue of food security. And India has tremendous possibilities here of having a food security lifeline between India and these countries. On top of that, defense. India's rising defense profile, its change of policies, is willing now to sell arms and this and that, and a certain degree of disillusionment with the United States, which is moving away from this region, as we know, because they have become self-sufficient in oil, and this region doesn't have the same strategic importance for them, barring, of course, the future of Israel, as we are seeing today, is leading to a lot of problems. So therefore, they want alternative partners. And India, with its maritime security policies, its navy and everything else, is a partner. And India wants to do Atmanirbharta in defense manufacturing. These people, UAE, I know there have been talks where they are willing to invest in our defense manufacturing with buyback arrangements and this and that, which, if it develops, is a huge plus for us. And then, in terms of the de-Islamization, the de-radicalization of these societies, has very important implications in terms of our own subcontinent, in terms of elements in our own Muslim population, Pakistan, Turkey, the OIC in general, because if these conservative Gulf monarchies take a very different line, over time it's going to have a very salutary impact on the Muslim radicalization that we see globally on the issue of terrorism and everything else. And this is a huge safety valve for us. And when people see how so-called icon of Hindutva in India is being feted and honored in Abu Dhabi, it sends a very powerful message. On top of that, he inaugurates the Ram Temple and then goes and inaugurates the Swaminarayan Temple in Abu Dhabi. Look at the message it sends. So, and the Prime Minister, I must say, has a tremendous knack of establishing personal ties. The manner in which he has established these personal ties with the UAE Amir,
right,
and the praise and the lavish praise he showered on him in his speeches in Abu Dhabi for the gesture he made to allow the erection of this temple, which would be Hindu in its characteristics.
That's right.
I think was well deserved. So he knows that in these countries, personal relationship, personal equations, personal chemistry is very important in terms of foreign policy.
So let me bring in Mr. Swaran Singh also. Mr. Swaran Singh, where has the Prime Minister succeeded where perhaps other Indian leaders, I wouldn't say failed, but perhaps have faltered or underassessed the potential of ties with the Middle East, specifically Gulf countries, UAE, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia? In other words, what has worked for the Prime Minister?
There is no denying of the fact that today India has friendly relations with the whole spectrum of nations in the Middle East. Nations that often do not sort of see eye to eye with each other are all friendly to India. There's no doubt about it. But of course, this has been a continuous process in the making. For example, till 70s, most of these countries in the Middle East that we are engaging today, they were smaller clans and smaller counties and cities. They were not really on a global platform at that time. It is only discovery of oil that transformed, first of all, their economic profile. And of course, it has resulted later in change in their societal leanings, and of course, to some extent, political reforms that we see more recently. Likewise, in India's case, till 71 particularly, Pakistan was world's largest Muslim country, had a certain leverage in engaging with these Middle East nations, which are largely ruled by families. And India has also transformed. Pakistan broke into two. So it's a continuous process which has seen accelerating pace every next year in that sense. And now, of course, with the hyperactive foreign policy under Prime Minister Modi, we see that personal bonhomie that he's able to bring about, particularly creates very good outcomes in case of Middle East, which are largely ruled by families, and those are the people, individuals who take decisions in each of these countries, and therefore that personal bonhomie and engagement makes an enormous difference to complementarities that have evolved over a period of time. And on top of it is for India, Indian citizens, people of Indian origin, who are contributing enormously to the development in our country, in India. Remittances of Indians coming from foreign countries annually are even today more than the total FDI and foreign aid put together. So there is a direct connect, societal connection in India's development, whether it is at the level of technology transfers or it is helping various Indian families in terms of remittances coming. So complementarities on both sides, not just Indian side, both sides were evolving over a period of time. And now, of course, the fact that India's leadership at the very top is able to connect with each of these leaders at the level of personalities facilitates it, makes the process far more accelerated, makes it a matter of celebration. And of course, engaging diaspora and culture has always been very, very, very clear front focus of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy. His engagement with diaspora makes it very important for these countries to see how popular he is at home with Indian diaspora and of course around the world. So complementarities are being maximized with this personal relationship that Prime Minister Modi is building with each of these leaders.
So just very quickly, coming back to you, Mr. Swaran Singh, if there were, as you say, complementarities, why did the others before Mr. Modi not sense this opportunity? I get this sense that there was some unrealized potential there.
I wouldn't say that they had not seen it or sensed it, but the pace of engagements at the global level are very different. It's not restricted to one particular region. Overall engagement of India in terms of foreign policy at the global level is completely different. Pace is very different under Prime Minister Modi. There were a lot of visits happening between India and Middle East even before that. So it's not that visits were not happening, diplomatic relations were not there. Diplomatic relations also started from 1970s, as I said, after the oil revolution came about and they became suddenly so prosperous. But the pace is different. I wouldn't say that engagement was.
So why weren't the others as interested in pushing in a more urgent manner the equations? I mean, we would have been taking this even further. We have seen, of course, that perhaps because of the slight, I suppose, diffuse nature of our approach, maybe even confused nature of our approach, the underappreciation, we allowed for other competitors like China, etc., to sort of get in there. Would you agree?
That's what I'm saying. The personality of Prime Minister Modi
personality
makes the difference.
Oh, it's not the vision. It's only the personality. Okay, let's open this up. Let's open this up because I want to bring in Mr. Brahma Chileni. Mr. Chileni, how does the deepening and widening relationship, now we've established that it is deepening and widening, how does the relationship change the geopolitical balance of power in the region, and does it favor India? If so, how?
Two things are happening. First, the prominent players in the Middle East, like UAE and Saudi Arabia, are like India, seeking to diversify their risks. They're trying to hedge against dependency on the United States. They are seeking to engage with other important players, just like India is doing, right? So in a way, both India and the prominent players in the Middle East are pursuing multi-alignment. That is one critical factor why we are seeing this traction. Of course, there's also one other aspect, which is that earlier in the earlier governments in India, we did not seek to convert the energy deals that we were signing with the countries in the Gulf into strategic partnerships. We limited our diplomacy to getting energy, to sending professionals and workers to secure remittances, but we did not have a strategic view of the Middle East as a potential partner of India. We did not establish defense and security ties with them the way we have in recent years. For example, now we have deepening strategic partnerships with important players, the UAE and India. Their relationship now covers the whole gamut of areas, including defense and security to education. This is the new dynamism that we are seeing. And I think the focus on building close strategic partnerships is what's elevating India's diplomacy in the Middle East. And of course, the third factor, which has also been highlighted by Ambassador Sibal and also by my friend Swaran Singh, is the personal rapport. In international relations theory, we kind of focus too much on how cold calculations of national interest drive world affairs. Actually, as we are seeing from Modi's diplomacy, he has made personal rapport with world leaders critical to his outreach. And we are seeing how that personal rapport is paying dividends. The way he established a strong personal rapport with the UAE president, whom he calls his brother, President Sheikh Mohammed, that has been a critical factor in the way UAE and India ties have developed. They have blossomed in a way which was unthinkable some years ago.
And as I've asked you also, how does this change the geopolitical realities or the balance of power in the region?
I think that's a good question, Rahul, because what we're seeing is that first the US focused largely on Israel as its prime concern. And that has made many of these other countries, which are all Islamic, somewhat uneasy. So they are seeking partnerships with emerging powers like India, China. That's why China is also playing a very important role now. But Russia too. Russia, despite heavy Western sanctions, is now and has always been an important Middle East player. But even now, we had President Putin visit the UAE and Saudi Arabia just 2 months ago. And he was very well received. The way he made that trip indicated that both the UAE and Saudi Arabia believe that partnership with Moscow is going to be critical to their foreign policy. And I think in that broader context, we are seeing how these countries in the Gulf region in particular are seeking to hedge and to balance. That's where I think India gets more room to elevate its role in the region.
Let me bring in Andrew KP Leung. Mr. Leung, does China have now competition from India? Perhaps it thought that it had an open field, it could do a lot more and intensify its own relationship. But India seems to have got not just a foot in the door, but seems to have got more than half its body in the door. There is the IMEEEC corridor that is coming up, and many people think that's going to upend China's dream of having its own corridor going through that particular region. How do you see this unfolding, and do you think there will be friction?
Well, I think that too much meal has been made all the time about the competition of China with India. In fact, China is not competing with India. China is competing with the United States. China is the second largest economy in the world, and India is the fifth. So, and then, of course, China and India have got lots of disagreement on various areas. But India is by no means China's main competitor. I mean, China's worry is the United States. Now, let's go back to the Middle East. Why is the Middle East strategic? the Middle East is strategic. Just look at what's happening over the Red Sea. Because it controls, is the conduit of a lot of the world's trade, and oil and energy passes through all these passages. And of course, it is important not only for India, but for China and for other energy importers. Apart from energy, there is also a conduit for international trade. And look at the port of Hormuz, Hormuz, outside Iran. Anything happens there would disrupt the global supply and value chain. And so I think that this is a reflection of a multipolar world, and China's already wise up to it. Don't forget that not so long ago, China brokered a historic rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And hence, the Middle East is extremely important for China. China's view, global view, is multipolar. It's not any one country should dictate over all others. And this multipolarity is increasingly increasingly important, because you can see the United States can no longer call the shots all the time. Look at what's happening over Syria and even what's happening over Gaza now. So I think it's a reflection of a multipolar world. And India, of course, has always been pursuing a strategy of multi-alliance or alliances, not just with one power, but with multiple power centers. So I think that this is no surprise for China as well.
Let me just bring in Mr. Sibal. Mr. Sibal, do you sense from Mr. Leung's point of view that there is an underappreciation, perhaps even contemptuous underappreciation, of India's growing role in the Middle East?
Well, let me put it this way, Rahul. Just like our own neighbors, they play the China card against us. These countries in the Middle East simply can't ignore China in terms of China's role in financing infrastructure. It's the second largest economy, the biggest exporter. For their Vision 2030, these countries will involve China. Already, China has built big infrastructure projects even in Saudi Arabia. And if some things need to be completed in terms of the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, I am not sure if China will be excluded from this. At the end of the day, these countries in the Middle East, they have to look at their larger, longer-term interests, both trade and investment. And China is a big source of both trade and investment. And as was mentioned, some of these countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, they have looked upon China to be a kind of mediator in terms of stabilizing the situation there. But of course, China is physically far away.
Yeah.
India has the much greater advantage of being very close, just across the ocean. And then look at the historical ties between the Arab world and India. There's a long history to this. So in a sense, what we are seeing is a rediscovery of these ancient ties. And the fact that these countries, the new leadership, the young leadership of these countries, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, have moved away from Pakistan. Don't forget that the father of the present Emir was very close to Pakistan.
Yes.
And the Saudi monarchs before Mohammed bin Salman also had reservations about India. They were interfering in Kashmir, trying to mediate and all that. All that is passé. After Article 37 was abrogated, what happened?
370. Yeah.
370. UAE gave its highest honor to Modi.
Yeah.
So they're not bothered about this anymore.
Okay.
But I would like to put. I would not like to get into this equation about how India and China are rivals in the Middle East. I think we have our own strategy, our own interests, and these countries militarily will rely much more on India in the future than they will on China, because India is a much safer country to deal with. And they know the Indian system. The Chinese system is very opaque. I mean, the leadership may be very effective in terms of its economic progress and everything else.
True.
But the cultural contact is not there. There's a huge cultural contact with India. Look at the diaspora. If you have 8 million people there, how many do Chinese? How many Chinese?
I think that's a good point.
Difference. I think we shouldn't get too much worried about China's.
Okay, so let me finally come to you, Mr. Chileni. Let's look at the next steps. Can India hope to leverage Middle Eastern powers to perhaps temper the Chinese expansionism on India's doorstep? Can we rely on them? Will they be able to exert some influence to hold back Chinese, to say, counsel them? Can that happen?
That largely depends on India itself. As long as India is enjoying political stability, it has a strong government, its economy is booming, India's salience in the Middle East will continue to grow. And the countries in the Middle East will look at India as a close partner. So it's very much in India's own hands as to how it's viewed in the Middle East. But given India's trajectory of the last 10 years, its rising international profile, the fact it's the fastest growing major economy in the world, the fact that its geopolitical weight is now apparent across much of the world, these are the factors that make the sheikdoms in the Gulf look at India more seriously. They want to build closer partnerships with India. And now we are seeing for the first time that these countries are developing close defense and security ties with India.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been an enlightening conversation. Thank you very much. We've gone in to the depths of this equation, and we've looked at it from a global perspective, from a regional perspective, not just a domestic perspective. So thank you. In the second part of this show, in crux of the matter, we will look at the crucial swing state of Maharashtra and how it can influence the 2024 general election, viewers. It's an open contest. Is that where the context will be decided? I'm coming right back to that.